All right, so today's video started with a series of different questions, and then it spiraled into a whole bunch of other things that I'm not going to get into, but we do have three talking points. But this is how it started. This is how the idea started. So I asked ChatGPT, why is society still pushing college on people when the economy clearly shows it's not helping anyone anymore? Its response? Society keeps pushing college because the incentives, narratives, and institutions that promote it are strictly locked in. Even though the economic payoff has changed, the pressure persists not because it works, but because too many powerful systems depend on the belief that it does. Well, that's like selling people crap, and then when it doesn't work, you point the finger at them for not trying hard enough. All my recent college grads, put what you think down in the comments right now. Stop watching the video. Don't even watch the rest of the video. I don't want to know what you guys think of that statement. And without further ado, let's get into our quick opening monologue. Somewhere along the way, companies decided that training workers was optional, but disposable people were a core business requirement. This is what I keep saying about essential workers. You were essential during the bug days, but the moment that something went wrong, you felt as disposable as humanly possible. Back then, large corp, or the Death Star, was allowed to continue functioning, but everyone else was not. You couldn't go to hair a hair salon, you couldn't go to any sort of small business, they closed the gyms, everything except for Global Mart. And you're just kind of like, wait a minute. So we have to stay home because it's too dangerous, but the essential worker is noble. I remember when they used to show like cartoons of people who worked in society as cartoon characters, as calling you both a superhero but disposable at the same time because you were working when other people were hiding. That gave me different thoughts on what about work, what work really is. To me, I've never been a person that liked any sort of work. If I have to get up in the morning and go do something I don't want to do, no matter what it is, I don't enjoy it. Even if my job was to get up every morning and go to a place where there were infinitely beautiful Susie Rotten crotches and all my job was is to hang out with them all day, it's still work. And I wouldn't want to do it. And you guys are probably thinking, Millennial Stim, you're absolutely crazy. I'd love for that. No. What I want to be able to do is choose what I want to be able to do with my life day to day. Work rips that aspect away from you every single second that you're alive. Once the Soul Suck 5000 is pulled on, but with a pull cord like you start a lawnmower, that's how they start the Soul Suck 5000 every morning at 8 a.m. They rip on the cord, vroom, 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 and then it runs all day and it's attached. And all day you can feel it because being at work hurts. It hurts you spiritually, emotionally, physically, psychologically, in every single way. When you take away someone's freedom and replace it with work, it hurts because you're seeing the best years of your life get wiped away while you spend time at a place where you don't want to talk to the people, you don't want to be there. All you want to do is get enough money so that you don't have to be on the street. So then you could eat every couple days. So you can drive an unreliable car and you can pay your credit cards because you use your credit cards to buy groceries. That's it. I don't understand how this is continued for so long. At some point, someone has to say, you know what? This isn't working. But no, people who think like that are committing thought crimes. And believe me, your friend Millennial Steam commits a lot of thought crimes every day, even when he's not out here talking to you or live streaming or on a mini photo shoot at the park. He always has thoughts, and those are disruptive thoughts. Let's get into talking point number one. It's fascinating how jobs don't train you anymore, but still act offended when you don't arrive pre-assembled like IKEA furniture with 10 years of experience and your own toolkit? I've often asked myself that question too. They're not interested, but at the second the machine fails, if you exaggerated your resume and expected to get at least some general direction when you got to work, even though you claim to be able to know everything that there was to do on the resume, but it's impossible to do that. No two jobs, even in the same industry, are identical. They require some investment at some point from someone above you. But when that someone above you has never had to do that job and they're telling you how to do it from a theoretical standpoint, do your job. And you can't use your 10 years of experience to figure it out, because that's one of the most difficult things it is to do, is to find a worker who's adaptable and affordable. Because if you throw someone into the work and they're going to ask a lot of questions, or they're going to have the same question every day. When I first started working at McDonald's, I had a boss that had this one rule: you are not allowed to ask me a question about work more than once. And if you asked him again, he would just look at you like you were stupid and he wouldn't answer the question. So at that point, you have to train yourself. And that's when those 10 years of experience come into play. If you can't train yourself in a new position, you will not last long. And it doesn't matter what kind of job it is, whether it's pushing shopping carts, washing cars, folding clothes. God only knows what you do after you make tacos at the Taco Bell after midnight. But whatever you do, figure it out is a big part of our society. And I'm not saying I agree with this, because there's a lot of people that have gotten murked from figuring it out. There's a lot of people who aren't here with us. There are people that have been pulled through a 6-inch tube while working in a warehouse as part of the job. That was a bad day for Johnny Sixpack. But it goes to show the callous nature of regular work. On top of that, you have to go to college, even though you don't want to because of the expense. 99% of the time, you're never going to end up in a field that you actually want, because it requires an advanced degree. Hence, all my psychology majors out there. Let's give it up to the psychology majors working in retail, when your professor told you that that's where your end position was going to be. In your last semester, when the professor looks at the class and says, get a job at Trader Joe's, they offer good benefits. You know that they've just stamped you with loser on the forehead. Thanks for getting the degree, but you wasted $50,000 of your money. And guess what? You have the rest of your life to pay it back. But a lot of corporations require it. And this isn't because they care. There are a lot of applicants out there in the world. Literally tens of millions of people all fighting over the same jobs. People who spent years and sent in thousands of resumes into applicant tracking software that never once blinked when it decided, nope, gonna pass on this one. And then you start going months and months and months and realizing, wait a minute. And it comes down to you're just not putting the right things into your resume, or they're just not interested. But when they are interested, the 4-year degree is going to be your minimum filter. Did you go to school? Yes or no? Yes? All right. You can apply to this minimum wage job. No? Well, you better keep looking. Lower your expectations for employment. Lowering your expectations for every aspect of your life is a requirement of being a pro in today's society. If you can't lower your expectations about your work, your car, where you live, or how much money you're going to earn, you're constantly going to be disappointed. I know I am. I mean, yesterday when I walked into that water and ice and I saw that mildly attractive pro woman, I was like, you know what? Maybe I had a chance. From her perspective, no way. I'll lower my standards to that, but she's not going to lower her standards to my standards, which means that we have a conflict. And this is what happens when large entities are searching for labor units. They want a certain type, they want college educated, but they also don't want to pay. And that's really, at the end of the day, why they get the applicants that they're forward to by the company. In fact, I've had this conversation many times with salespeople, the cold calling salespeople, and they hire people who are willing to accept a job that's this, let's say, not anyone's favorite. And when they get those people, the people who are truly desperate for employment, because if you're going to do sales or insurance or you're going to do any kind of job, any public facing phone job, you've already got to hate yourself. You got to walk into that bathroom in the morning and look at yourself, point at your face and say, I hate this guy. And then you can go work that job. Until you can do that, chances are you're not going to survive your first day because it's brutal. And they burn through people so quickly that they've gotten to the bottom of the barrel and now they're just going through bedrock. But you've got to find those people because the machine needs them. And I'm going to move on to talking point number 2, because if not, I can go on talking forever just on this particular topic. Training used to be called onboarding. Now it's called your personal journey, which is corporate speak for we're not paying for this anymore. That is exactly true. Corporations used to entice people by offering tuition, reimbursement, training, online classes, or some other incentive bonuses or some other thing. Like when I finished my first college degree, I remember that my cohorts were getting big bonuses to go work for tech companies, large bonuses. And then as slowly as more and more people came along and the market became saturated, well, the same job that was considered good at that time was now considered worthless. You went into a job and they weren't going to offer any in-house training. In fact, the last couple of nights I've been watching this episode of The Proper People, right? They're photographers that go to abandoned sites and do video shoots there, take pictures of the site. And one of these places is the IBM school. I think it's in New York. I think they said somewhere called the Palisades or something like that. It's in New York. It's been abandoned for like 20 years, or I think. Like the furniture inside of it really dates itself. Nothing new, but just laid there. A place that used to bring in executive level workers from all over the planet to come to school at a place like this. Well, there's a reason that place is abandoned. That place cost a lot of money to keep open. Just building it, just reeks of money. Executive suites, a hotel on site, classrooms that still look like they were futuristic back then. But places like this became obsolete because large corporations like IBM realized, well, we're not paying for this because their only priority is to the shareholders, the executives, and the owners. Everyone else in our society can bite it. And that's where you just started seeing the downturn. And that while I was watching this episode, of course, I'm always 3 sheets to the wind by the time I get to this point because I always am. Never call a person like me after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I won't have a coherent thought in my head. But just looking at the willingness to invest back then into workers, it meant that they were seen as something to invest in. Nowadays, I remember when I started working for Kroger's back in 2006, I think, during the financial crisis, 2006, 2008, somewhere in there. I remember that even though I was taking an entry-level job, they made it a point to provide 1 day of training at a training store. Years later, that training went away. They hired you on the spot, you learned, or you didn't, but that was it. They weren't interested in that part of doing business. We're not paying for this means They're not paying for certifications. They're not paying for college. They're not paying a living wage. And frankly, if you don't come back the next day, they're not going to lose any sleep over it, because that mentality in our society has changed to the detriment of the proletariat. Because this means that the opportunity that once was held by people, by low level people, even college educated people, has gone the way of the dinosaurs. Your 10 years of experience provide you the entryway into a job that most likely no one would ever consider to be a career. Sometimes you sit in a job interview and everything's going great. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What problems have you solved? How do you deal with this and this? Some technical questions about what VPN does, or what a VLAN does, or how would you set this machine up? The little things like that, just to make sure that you're competent. Something a CompTIA can't teach you, right? But you better make certain that you have that cert before you even apply to that job, even though the questions will never touch any of the stuff in that certification. So you are fully capable, but at the same time, they're always looking for a reason to say that you're not good enough, or a reason to justify the less than stellar hourly wage. When you ask them, how is it possible that you can pay less than In-N-Out burgers? Their faces will go completely white, because you've asked a question that you were never supposed to ask. When you're competing with that market, well, there's no competing. In fact, the headquarters of In-N-Out Burger announced recently that it's moving to Tennessee. Why? California is just too expensive. You can't make profit when all of your profits being taken away by high wages. Even in a state like California, a mandatory $20 an hour wage is still $6 below the living wage. But that's way too much money for these companies. If it were up to them, every state would still have the federal minimum wage of $7.25. That's the way they think. It's not whether or not our workers can function, it's how much profit we can get. And that mindless greed has caused thousands of businesses to fail. It's the reason why both Target and Walmart have lost their CEOs in the last few months, because the CEOs see no way forward, and they're going to have to synergize. Or I remember seeing that word at the company back that I was working for back in 2008. Once you started seeing synergy pamphlets showing up at your desk, you knew that it wasn't long. All right, talking point number 3. We've got to squeeze it in 2 minutes. We've reached a point where the job posting is basically a shopping list of skills the company doesn't want to pay for. I've never heard it put so absurdly, but that truly is what it is. When you look at that shopping list, or let's just call it a laundry list of things that they want: a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD in physics, and 5 to 10 years of hands-on experience, while being able to teach a course in whatever they want you to do. And then you look at what the actual job is, and I'm being facetious here, it's working at Chipotle. But for some reason, they have a list. And that list very, very rarely meets with reality. I've looked at job postings that you wonder, it's like, man, this job should be paying $250,000 a year. This person's managing, this person's handling all of these technical aspects while maintaining a good rapport and amazing soft skills with the entire corporation's employees. What does it pay? Not enough. Not enough to show up every day, that's for sure. And that's the thing. It's the workers tell you how they feel in real time. When a worker has to take a job out of desperation that has a list like this, and then they show up and they realize that they're cleaning the floors and scrubbing the toilet, indignities slowly seeping out of their rear, it doesn't take long for them to think to themselves, you know what? I can't do better financially, but at least I can have the dignity of failing in silence somewhere else. Because it's not about winning anymore in our society. It's about participation trophies. Even in the work world, we all know that the likelihood of us being able to capitalize on anything, well, it doesn't work for us. In order to capitalize, the capitalists have to make certain that they control every aspect of your life. From the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep, they capitalize on every opportunity to steal every single penny in your pocket. Again, no pun intended, they stop making the penny, but you get the point. That's what it is. It's how does this benefit us? Every job interview isn't about skills. It's about how does it benefit us? And if it doesn't, well, next candidate. Because we've got to find someone who's willing to have more skills and less pay. All right, so let's get into our closing here. When a system makes workers pay to be useful, it's not building careers, it's renting human beings until they break. Wow. I, I asked it for a cold close, and that's icy. Renting human beings. I guess you could call it that, right? I rent myself to the highest bidder every morning at 8 a.m. And when I get home, there's nothing left. But the worst part is that when I get home, I still need another job. So, am I just not renting myself out enough? There's a joke that I want to use from Family Guy here, but it's inappropriate. And the algorithm is always looking for anything inappropriate to say. So, you guys probably know about what I'm thinking about Quagmire and 100 or 1,000. How many do you rent yourself out to? Well, only your rear can end up telling you that. But this video is over. I hope you found it funny. And I will talk to you guys in the future because this video is going to be put up somewhere in the future.